Once seen as a safe and peaceful nation, Sweden has seen a surge in gang violence, with children being used to carry out serious illegal acts. The government is set to lower the age of criminal responsibility to 13 years. But will this do anything to cut crime and deter children? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, Sweden, known as one of the happiest countries on earth, has taken a dangerous turn. Criminal gangs are recruiting children via social media and using them to carry out murders, bombings and shootings. In response, the country is planning to lower the age of criminal responsibility for children from 15 to 13 years old.
Gangs of armed youths terrifying the public. Sweden's once peaceful streets have become riddled with crime, and increasingly it's children who are pulling the trigger. In the last 2 years, the number of murder suspects who are under 15 has more than tripled. Some gang-related hits are being carried out by children as young as 10, lured by gangs through social media in return for money.
These days, everyone wants to be a murderer. It's incredibly sad to see that this is what young people in these circles aspire to.
The ones who do it these days, they're only here for the money. They know it's good money, so that's why they end up in this.
The Swedish government wants to lower the age of criminal responsibility from 15 to 13. Currently, anyone under 15 cannot be prosecuted. Their cases go to social services. Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson is calling the reform a necessary step to restore safety.
Swedish legislation is not designed for gang warfare and child soldiers, but we're changing that.
Across Europe, ages for criminal responsibility vary from 10 in Ireland and the UK to 16 in Portugal and Luxembourg. I asked a specialist in criminology if lowering the age will stop children committing crimes.
This move, instead of being a remedy, it risks criminalising vulnerability in already young, vulnerable, impressionable minds. It's not really effective at preventing violence. It's not going to be seen as a deterrent by these young people either. It's much, much better to address the problems at the social root, which would prevent gang recruitment in the first place, address inequalities, address social exclusions, address that deep-seated lack of belonging for young people.
The government hopes this reform will be a long-term solution. But with gangs actively recruiting, can Sweden's change in law stop the next wave of child criminals?
Well, let's bring in our guests. Joining me in the studio, we have Peter Bleksley. Peter is a former police detective and crime analyst. In Geneva, in Switzerland, we have Gunilla von Hall. She's foreign affairs correspondent at the Swedish daily newspaper Svenska Dagbladet. And in Malmö, in Sweden, we have Ardavan Khoshnood, who is a criminologist. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Gunilla, to you first of all, just tell us why the Swedish government is doing this.
Well, there is a sense of urgency in Sweden. We have big problems, increasing problems with youth criminality, gang criminality. The government, the Swedish police now says that 1,700 young people under 18 are active members in criminal networks. And almost daily we have some kind of bombing, there is shooting, there is even murder in public. And this is a growing problem. When the government came to power in 2022, the priority, according to the government, was to crack down on crime. So it is an alarming situation, I would say. It's been reported all over the international media how Sweden has a big problem with criminal gangs.
Ardavan, those statistics are shocking. So 1,700 under 18s are active members of organised crime gangs. I saw another statistic. Last year, there were 93 under 15s in prison in Sweden for murder, attempted murder, or aiding and abetting murder. 93 children, basically, who've committed the most heinous crimes.
It's unfortunately that is the case today in Sweden. We have one of Europe's highest rates of firearm violence, one of Europe's highest rates of explosive violence. We have a lot of youths and children today active in organized and unorganized crime. And also perhaps most serious, according to me at least, many of these youths active in organized crime are also a pawn for foreign powers to try to influence Sweden. So it's a very serious situation, and that is also why the Swedish government are trying to have some serious reforms in this matter.
Peter, to you, are you in any way surprised by those statistics? Because we think of Sweden, we think of a liberal, peaceful, good standard of living country, and yet there is clearly a very serious issue here.
And as a young adult, Sweden was seen as a utopia, a very aspirational country that so many of us wanted the UK to be like. And now it's tragic to see what's happening over there, albeit, of course, Britain is plagued by an epidemic of knife crime and so much murder that goes along with that.
And tell me, in your experience, how should the Swedish be tackling this problem with young people getting into these gangs and being used to commit murder?
Well, lowering the age of criminal responsibility from 15 to 13 is a positive move. I would suggest they could go even lower, because in Britain, the age of criminal responsibility is set at the age of 10. That was set by the Children and Young Persons Act in 1963, and it hasn't been altered since. Although the flip side to that is, just like in Sweden, many, many people within the establishment do all they possibly can to stop young people being incarcerated. Now, of course, there is a time when it would be inappropriate to send a young person to prison if they were committing minor crimes, if they'd perhaps been coerced or forced or bullied into doing stuff that they didn't want to do. But when we're talking about young people, say from 14 through to 17, that know what they're doing, that are consciously taking part in the most serious form of criminality, then there is no other solution other than to lock them up.
So what do you say to people who would argue that these children are victims themselves?
There's been a growing attitude that they are so often victims. It's almost become the default position over here. Let's not treat them as offenders, let's treat them as victims. I think everything has to be taken on a case-by-case basis. Look at the background, look at the evidence. What does the criminal intelligence tell you? Then you can make an informed judgment on, is this a child that's been bullied and coerced, or is this a committed and willing lawbreaker?
Thanks, Peter. Gunilla, to you, Peter mentioned that the UK has a problem with knife crime, which it has. The issue many criminals have in the UK is they can't get hold of firearms. And that's why they end up resorting to using knives to hurt their rivals and enemies. What kind of weapons are these young people using in Sweden when they carry out these attacks?
Well, it's all kinds. I mean, a lot of it is homemade, that they actually, when they use explosives against houses and people. And there's also a lot of knives, and weapons is also floating around in society. It's not so difficult to get hold of weapons like guns for young people. So it's in that way, maybe it's similar to the UK, but I would say in Sweden, there's a lot of, after the Balkan War, for example, there was a lot of weapons in Europe, and that has trickled down. And that is also accessible in Sweden. So yes, all kinds of weapons. And the dangerous ones are the homemade ones. They have no control over what they're putting together, and then they're throwing into buildings.
Ardavan, just come in on these homemade weapons then that these young child criminals are using in Swedish gangs. I'm guessing the internet is providing a rich source of material.
Absolutely. Internet is giving them both the knowledge and the information needed. But also, let's not forget that the internet is also the main way criminal gangs and networks in Sweden today are recruiting these youths and children. And that is also why we need to take these steps we're taking in Sweden today in order to restore some kind of order, because Sweden has lost deterrence, and the gangs are using, the criminal networks are using this legal vacuum in order to exploit youths and children. So this is a quite reactive step Sweden is taking, and one reason is also because Sweden cannot really shut down the internet and shut down apps which gangs use to recruit youths.
Gunilla, I can see you nodding in agreement with Ardavan. Just spell out for our viewers how these gangs are recruiting and incentivizing young Swedes into committing really horrible murders. I read one story in Sweden where, apps like TikTok and gaming apps that young people are frequenting, that messages are being exchanged on here about you drive to Malmo or Copenhagen, shoot this guy and we'll pay you 10,000 euro.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. It's all online, and it's an exchange of money or exchange of getting an importance and getting an identity. So it's really it's happening online, and for these young people, often these kids, these children, they are already they're poor, they're outside society, they're school dropouts, and for them, that gives them also a kind of identity besides the money. And it's all organized. It's working so well now, one could say. So that's why the government has to do something, because the criminal gangs, they are after go below 15 and they cannot be prosecuted. They will have very lean sentences. So go lower in ages, use the kids, and that's how they get away with it. The older gangs that really, really are very dangerous.
Peter, as law enforcement, how can you get to the root of the problem here and stop gang bosses who don't want to pull the trigger themselves hiring children as young as 13?
Deterrence. And by that, I mean arrest, charging, conviction, and imprisonment. I'm afraid a liberalised kind of view towards the criminal justice system does not fundamentally work. To see what is happening in Sweden, the land once of social cohesion, saunas and ABBA that we all had such a great affection for, even if we hadn't been there, to see what is happening to that once great nation is heartbreaking. There needs to be robust policing, robust law enforcement, and moreover, control over their immigration.
And just tell me, do you genuinely think then that liberal Swede, that kind of vibe, has resulted in where they are now?
We've had a lot of that in the UK, and it's done us no good. It's got us to the grip of a knife crime epidemic, and we see similar kind of attitudes that have been tried elsewhere have manifestly got us where we have got, be that Sweden, the UK or elsewhere. Robust law enforcement and severe deterrence are the way forward.
And how difficult is it to go after the gang bosses themselves?
You need the resources, you need the officers doing that need to be experienced, very, shall I say, devious, lawfully audacious. It takes time, effort, resources, and a lot of thinking to be able to bring these people down. But it can be done.
Changing the age of criminal responsibility, as Sweden is about to do you think this is the first step towards reclaiming the streets?
Only if it is backed up by policies that will incarcerate children who know what they're doing. And when I say children, those of 13, 14, 15. If you plant a bomb, are you being coerced or are you a willing participant? I would suggest you are the latter, and therefore you need to be appropriately punished.
Gunilla, what's the view amongst the Swedish public? Just go on, come in there. I can see you don't agree with Peter. Just say what you were going to say.
Perhaps Peter is right, and you have statistics backing up that when you lower the age and you're incarcerating them, it actually brings down the crime. Maybe it does. I mean, something obviously has to be done, but there are studies also showing, and there's a big debate in Sweden with a lot of people criticizing also the government, saying that early exposure to the criminal system, being in a negative environment, that could instead increase the juvenile crime. And are we really addressing the symptoms here? Well, we put them in behind bars, but what about the underlying causes? The poverty, the social exclusion, the problems we have with integration, gang recruitment. Maybe perhaps one doesn't exclude the other, but I don't think it's that simple to just put 13-year-olds with running around with machine guns behind bars.
Ardavan, I can see you shaking your head there. I'm guessing you don't agree with that theory.
I'm thinking that looking at current studies, they don't say that do not imprison youths, do not imprison children. What studies say is that do not imprison them with adults. And that is the main problem. When you put children and youths with adults, they have a higher risk of reoffending, especially reoffending in violence. But keeping youths in custody, keeping children in custody in specific special youth units where you focus on compelling school, where you focus on trauma-related healthcare, for example, that may very well have good effects. We don't know because different studies uses different methodologies. But to be very clear here is that I do agree that having a child, having a youth in a prison is not a good environment. However, having them running around with machine guns, committing homicide, that is not a good environment either.
And Ardavan, just tell me, do you think this change to the law will genuinely put young people off committing crime, or do they even care? If you're minded enough to pick up a gun and shoot someone in a Swedish town or city, are you going to be scared of the law?
I do not think that this law will bring any deterrence in that way. I do not think so. I do not think that these children or youths does have that consequence thinking they need to have to understand that they will be behind the bars. On the contrary, for many of them, being behind bars is a positive signal to the outside world that look at me, I'm a masculine person. However, we should not forget that this is a reactive action from the government so that we can have at least some control over our cities before going in with more proactive actions and proactive measures so that we can get to the root causes.
Peter, you've spent your entire career in law enforcement. When you sit in an interview room with a teenage suspect who's been brought in for a violent crime, are they scared of going to prison? Are they that hardened at that young an age?
They come in all different shapes, sizes and attitudes. Some who have been almost fallen into criminality might present entirely different from a child who was raised in criminality with criminal parents who actually see that crime as a lifestyle, a way of earning your daily bread. They can be very, very different. What I would like to say in response to your other contributors is I completely agree that punishment without rehabilitation can be a complete waste of time. So there does need to be the money spent on the resources to try and find a different path for these young people to go down. But what I will say comprehensively is that children in prison can't plant bombs and they cannot pull the trigger on a machine gun.
Tell me, Peter, in your experience, do you think a short, sharp shock will change someone at a young age? Or is it just introducing them to like-minded people? They go through the system, they come out, and they've got a network.
Short sentences for people of whatever age tend to be in the UK a complete and utter waste of time. What the prison service needs is time to work on these people so that they can confront their offending, admit their guilt, realise the wrongs they've done, try and make good and find a different route to follow in life.
Gunilla, give us your impression of what Swedish people are thinking at the moment, because we see the headlines from outside of Sweden. What are Swedes, right-minded Swedes, who work hard, pay their taxes, just want to live, get on with life, bring up their family safely? What's the talking like amongst your average Swedish family on this?
People are really worried. Really. I mean, I know people now who don't go out at night in Stockholm, in Gothenburg, in Malmö, because they're worried about, because you could be, it's not that you're the target, but they're throwing a bomb or an explosion in a house and you happen to live next door, you happen to walk by with your dog. So people are really worried something has to be done. It's out of control. Then the question what to do, I think Peter has a point that you can be, prison, but what kind of rehabilitation you do at the same time? How will you take care of these children or try to steer them away from crime, but doing it from behind bars? If that's possible, it would be great. I think one worry is that you now lower the age to 13. What's the next step? Will you then go down to 12, 11, 10, and what happens then? But I think another point is that how you're going to do these youth prisons, how will you train the staff, how will you actually, deal with the children who are in these youth prisons, how will you safeguard them in custody? So there are many question marks still, but people in general in Sweden feel like, do something. This is getting out of control.
Ardavan, give us your thoughts on this, because I think a lot of people will be shocked to hear that Swedish people don't want to go out at night because they don't feel safe.
Unfortunately, during the last 10 years, we have seen that completely innocent individuals, and with innocent I mean individuals who has nothing to do with crime and criminality, have been killed and have been injured in different attacks, not because they have been targeted themselves, but because, just like Gunilla said, they are trying to get another antagonist, and the result is that innocent people are killed. The criminals call them collateral damage, and it's not that important for them who dies or who lives. So the situation is very, very serious in Sweden, and the government have been taking some very important steps to reclaim the streets. And I hope that this new reform, if the Swedish lawmakers pass this bill, can be one step towards reclaiming back our streets in Sweden again.
Do you have confidence, Ardavan, in that happening?
Let me be quite blunt that the situation has been quite serious for more than 15 years and nothing seems to be helping. I believe that if we are going to see results, we need to have plans that are far more than the 4 years politicians always plan for. This is not a political question, and I think that our politicians need to understand that as well, so that we can have reactive and proactive steps. If we do not, then Sweden will continue burning.
Thank you, Ardavan. Peter, to you, that's a very good point, isn't it? Politics, a lot of it is short-term, my next election, me getting re-elected. This needs to be a really coherent long-term strategy.
Sadly, that is very true, no more so than here in the UK. And there is something that I need to make explicitly clear. Our young offender institutions, in other words, the prisons where we lock up our young people, are amongst the most violent and unruly in the entire prison estate. So I would not want our colleagues thinking that we've got it exactly right here. However, some do come out reformed, some come out worse. My views and expressions and hopes that I've expressed here are how I would like it as much in the UK as I would in Sweden. Until we get rid of political short-term views, I feel that both once great nations might continue to suffer.
And let's be clear, London has a gang problem as well. So has Liverpool, Dublin. I mean, you look around Europe, there are gangs in every city because they're trading drugs, they're selling weapons and they're making money.
Drugs so often lies at the very core of what the criminality, it drives criminality. It's the fourth biggest industry in the world. It's bigger than the textiles industry. And look, we're all wearing clothes. It's that vast. Until we have a global rethink about what is currently the illegal drugs industry, then the harm will continue, the deaths will increase, the criminals will get richer, and the streets will get more dangerous.
Thank you, Peter. Gunilla, just looking ahead, I mean, do you think this law change is the beginning of something really significant in terms of life and security and safety for Swedish families?
I wish it was. People have a hope now, and it's clear something needs to be done. It's true that we have an election next year, so the government is acting now in order to show that they are hands-on and they're sending the signal we're doing something. But I hope we will continue afterwards. And again, I think some kind of combination needs to be done with tougher penalties together with addressing the root causes. What is creating this kind of gang violence in a country like Sweden? I don't recognize my country anymore compared to 20, 25 years ago. I don't know what happened, but the society is not well.
I'll leave the final point to Peter. You're all for locking them up basically at a young age, aren't you?
Yes, I am, at any age. If you plant a bomb, if you pull the trigger on a machine gun, there is one place you belong and one place only, in prison.
Is it your view that that is all, even at the age of 13, that is all they will understand?
Yes, there needs to be deterrence. Lock them up, rehabilitate them.
Peter Bleksley, thank you. Gunilla and Ardavan in Sweden, we wish you all the very best. Thank you for joining us on this Roundtable. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for Roundtable, TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.